right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm misannouncing those lunch breaks while we used to host on ground that, okay, it's time for lunch. And there used to be so much of grit that we required to get you back into the ballroom, right? So while I miss those scenes, I also assume and I hope that you are well fed with good lunch and also the good information that we are taking care of. Well, the acceptance of information and technology is as critical to your organization. And I think that's something that has never been greater, right? So the session that's coming up will look at understanding the challenges and opportunities of modernizing the IT infrastructure of an organization, as well as tuning it to capitalize on data and other insights as well. Let the experts, let the leading figures do the talk. So allow me to please welcome our panel members. We are happy to see you once again, Saurabh Chatterjee, President and Head IT, Web Sales and Travel from Bajaj Allianz General Insurance. Welcome, Saurabh. With that, we would also be inviting Jagdish Ramaswamy, the President and Chief Digital Officer from Hindalco Industries. We welcome you, Neeraj Goyal, the Head of Technology and Managing Director, Global Hub India from NatWest Group India. Well, with that, Arijit Banerjee, Head India Region from Tata Communications. A hearty welcome to you as well. We're weaving the conversations that are just going to come up and light up the screen. The conversations will be woven by our panel moderator, Sonak Ghoshal, the Partner Technology Consulting from PwC India. With that, Mr. Ghoshal, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Shikha. A very good afternoon to our audience, and I hope all of you are staying healthy and safe in this harrowing time. A very warm welcome to all of our panelists, and a very big thank you to ET for arranging the session and the platform and inviting us. Without any further ado, we'll dive into our topic, today's topic of rebooting the value of today's enterprise architecture. The theme of today's discussion is going to be around understanding the challenge and also sensing the opportunity while dealing with the architecture of today's enterprise in the face of the continuous change that is happening. We have been living in an unprecedented time of pandemic where customer expectations and way of doing business is undergoing a rapid evolution. There is increased pressure on the digital infrastructure, both in terms of serving the end customer through digital channels, as well as optimize and automate the backend processes to bring in more speed and efficiency. While the market is evolving fast, technology and innovation is also matching the stride with equal pace. Technologies are emerging in the form of hyperscaling ability, super fast network, drones and robots, augmented and virtual reality, AI and ML, IT ops in form of DevOps, DevSecOps, MLOps, and many more. We're also seeing substantial change in the way applications are going to be developed. As latest as yesterday, Gartner has come up with the bold prediction that there is a possibility that 80% of applications are going to be developed outside the IT team through the usage of low-code and no-code platforms. When did we think of all that? Now, given that what we are seeing today, Mr. Arijit, my first question will be for you. In your view, what is the real phase of this digital transformation? And with the change in the pandemic that has been brought in, how will it support this change? What's your view on this?
Thank you, Shaunak, and a very good afternoon to everyone who is tuned in today and to all my fellow panelists. And like Shaunak said, I really hope all of you are really keeping safe and healthy. Now, it's well understood by now that the pandemic is kind of driving permanent changes to how societies will operate and how businesses across all sectors will need to pivot and adapt to succeed in the new world. But something else was also happening, in fact, well and much before the pandemic hit us. And it is not so much about the exponential technologies coming up one by one, but I think it is the convergence of all the exponential technologies, be it 5G, IoT, 3D, AI, quantum computing, and we can keep naming, that is permanently changing the fundamentals of every industry we can think of. So while COVID is kind of putting the need to transform on steroids, the convergence of technology is allowing us to respond appropriately. And I think in a very, very timely manner to this transformation requirement. Now, this convergence is making digital go mainstream across all sectors. It's like creating non-traditional business models. It's accelerating the rise of the network economy, which is further driving the platform businesses to emerge and kind of diminish all established industry boundaries. So companies today are actually trying to serve the customers' needs well beyond their core offerings. So armed with this power of convergence and the accelerated need to change, which the pandemic is kind of demanding, there are four facets of digital transformation which companies will focus on going ahead. First and foremost, I think, is redefining the entire customer experience. The wants and the needs of the customers will obviously be very different from what they were. Consumer priorities and behavior will all undergo dramatic shift across industries. The way we buy car, the way we shop, the way we dine, the way we travel, or whether we travel at all or not, I think everything will get reset. And the last best experience the customer gets in any B2C interaction will become his next lowest common denominator in terms of expectation. So things like hyper-personalization, extreme customer convenience, customer loyalty, and most importantly, I think trust, and developing that trust with your ecosystem, your customers, your partners, your stakeholders would be key for sustainable success. The second important facet of this digital transformation is going to be around workforce transformation, because the well-being of our workforce is kind of directly linked to the business performance. In the post-pandemic world, I think the interactions between people in both the physical workplace as well as via digital collaboration platforms will need to get adjusted to fit a more agile working model. Now, obviously, it is not going to be an either or question. Both will need to coexist. Productivity will have to be redefined from an input measurement as it is today to more of an outcome-based model. Usage of effective collaboration tools, which are going to be very, very critical as there is going to be a permanent shift towards increased remote working. Third, I think, is the need for radical cost management, which organizations would have kind of realized today. Because most often today, the organizations have a kind of an inflexible and high cost structures driven by legacy systems and high cost manual processes. So going ahead, the operating model will need to get completely relooked at, moving towards a more variable cost structure that can respond to the changing market needs more with more agility. This would include replacing manual processes with intelligent automation and building a very agile and flexible technology landscape. Last but not the least, I think the creation of a smart enterprise, as we call it, is going to be important. It'll be important to kind of build an end-to-end secure, connected digital organization, again, infused with intelligent workflows that then enable growth, agility, bring in efficiencies, foster innovation across the entire enterprise and the ecosystem it is kind of functioning. Because the end objective is going to be to make the customer journeys more intelligent, seamless, contactless to the kind of best extent possible, and consistent across the channels with the ability to serve just beyond the core need. And to achieve all of the above, I think organizations will get tested and they will need to completely reimagine their current IT systems, including cloud adoption, looking at more adaptable and software-defined networks, the right information architecture backed up by the right analytical capabilities, automation of the right business processes, including their supply chains, ability to handle remote workforces effectively, and finally, do all that with a very, very strong and intelligent security landscape. Back to you, Sean.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rajit. So if I just summarize what he said, you spoke about four pillars: customer experience, focus on customer experience, workforce transformation, relooking at the organization operating model, and also building a smart enterprise. These four pillars are going to be the key, looking at tomorrow's world. Mr. Neeraj, if I may invite you, if you want to add any more pillars to this, or do you want to get a little deeper into any of these dimensions? Your view, please.
Yeah, thank you, Sanak. And I would very much endorse, what Ajit said. I think customer experience is definitely one area, where we've seen a big difference, right? Most of our customers are now online, especially I'm talking about, if I look from a banking perspective. And what they are expecting is a very much personalized experience at a much faster pace, right, compared to any other time. And that's where, the digitization in the organization, I think, is going to play a big part, which is supported by things like cloud, automation, virtualization, right? I'll give an example, when the pandemic happened, and how this helped the pandemic. We as the bank operating in UK, suddenly were asked to introduce very new products into the market, right? Earlier, what would have taken us months, we were able to do because of these technologies which help us, move fast, like within weeks. And automations and things like, help you service your customer in a much faster way, where things would have done manually. You could utilize technologies like RPAs, automation, and things like that. So absolutely, I think getting more customer insights is just not about digital experience, but also how you monetize the data that you have, provide insights to the customer, which are meaningful, things about that they care, how do you provide those things to them. And other thing that Ajit also talked about, I think it changes the whole ways of working going forward. Everybody is now working from home and probably they're going to continue. we know, ways of working from home works really. That's where I thought digitization also had a big impact because of virtualization. I think most of the organization were immediately able to get their colleagues working from home because most of the desktops and things are on cloud. They've been virtualized. So these kind of things which have been done in terms of digitization, I thought did help, a big time in the COVID period. And just one quick example from banking perspective, I thought, another thing part of digitization, chatbots. I mean, they have become a very prominent player. Earlier, you would have, people talking, providing customer service, but now you have chatbots available 24/7. And those we have seen a great progress where not only the number of conversation, but the amount of containments have gone up. So these are some of the digitization things that have actually really helped during this pandemic.
Thank you so much, Mr. Neeraj. Saurabh, if I may invite you to add on to that topic, if you may.
Right, Shanak, thank you. And see, just adding on to one other element of people, I look, people are the ones, all the skill sets, with all the skill sets tend to digitize and take us forward. People are the ones who are actually the receivers of this, right? So what I believe is the pandemic has given, agree everything with, what Arijit and Neeraj said, but pandemic has given us a real opportunity to disrupt at a pace faster only because people who are experiencing digital and people who are taking digital to the next level have come to start trusting, and their confidence in adopting these tools have gone up. Look at what the payment platforms have done, right? I mean, look at what kind of transactions have happened with all the Google Pays and Phone Pays and all the world. The key is people. Even in an enterprise sense, right? Digital adoption is faster amongst all the stakeholders, whether it's customers, partners, internal employees. They have embraced it. Some have become champions, right? Beyond what they used to be, right? Adoption used to be for digital assets at a certain percentage, but look at what has happened. Approvals and budgets for the right business cases are, the appreciation for what digital can do and deliver to the business is much more due to the pandemic. And obviously the business models have evolved. More importantly, tech and digital, not just, and I don't say this in a purist technology sense, technology, architecture or infra, but tech and digital in general, right? Things which are helping provide a solution to the day-to-day problems. That has come center stage now and driving business models in the enterprises, and delivering on, on large scale strategy. So I go back to apart from all of this, people and their trust and adoption has been probably the biggest. The pace at which that has happened has been the fastest due to the pandemic.
Thanks, Saurabh. So trust had definitely been a key, right? I mean, people were probably, they didn't have an option. They had to get onto these particular digital platforms across industries. But it is a trust that they have got, which has really fostered the adoption. On that point, so Jagdish, I will come to you next. I will phrase a slightly different question to you. We're just moving on from this particular topic. The point is that we are seeing technology changing very fast, and we are seeing that every organization's IT architecture is getting impacted, right? Now, we also spoke about transformation for customers, transformation for our people, the way people are working, operating model, building smart enterprise. Is that having an impact on the agility and speed of the business? Now, is the architecture being able to gear up, cope with the demand of the agility and speed that business is asking for? And what kind of measures do you think is happening in the enterprises? If you can opine, if you can put your view, please. Mr. Jagdish, you are on mute.
Yeah, sorry about it. So thank you, Sanak. I just said a good question to follow up with the first. So let me put views in terms of how the IT architecture is going to change. First of all, I think it depends on the rhythm of your business. So understand that every business is not an internet business handling millions of users or millions of data, right? So assess the agility of your business, and I would say architect accordingly. Don't go by, I need to have an architecture which one size fits all is not the game. So there's no point in building an architecture that can enable millions of users when your business can only use a fraction of it. That's number one. So, but rather focus on creating an architecture that is super efficient, highly secure and flexible. And I'll add a little bit to that in my next few points. Okay. Now, if you look at the architecture today, it is no more an enterprise play. It is now ecosystem play. where you need to connect not only to your employees. I think even your own employees today have become somebody who is going to sit at home. How are you going to deal with them? So I think the IT guys have to think about the IT architecture as an ecosystem play, and the ability to connect with desirable elements, resources of the ecosystem quickly and in a secure manner and in an agile manner. Because you spoke about agility, right? Your ability to consume or bring in an application or a data from anywhere into your organization, that's one. So it's an ecosystem play. The architecture has to support that. Second, I think all of us know cloud is really questioning every convention that we know in IT architectures, which is very closed-ended, closed loop within on-premise. That's being fundamentally being challenged. So the pace of innovation on the cloud, not only in terms of ease of operations, but also in terms of novel solutions, the way it is going today is really mind-boggling. So I, in my opinion, I think gone are the days when we are going to make huge capex investments both in hardware and software. Yes, it's a jury is still out. People are struggling, but I think people are decisively moving more and more workload towards the cloud. So it's not about mitigating but it's about adoption. I think we have no choice but to adopt the cloud, and hence your architecture has to support this adoption of cloud very quickly and also multi-cloud operations, right? But while you may go gongo on cloud, you have to be really careful in terms of what stack of technology you want to go migrate to cloud first, and how do you want to take it. It's not very easy from a change management perspective. Third is, I think it's very important from an architecture standpoint now for us as an enterprise to differentiate between what is your core system and what are the other systems that is going to help you to engage with your ecosystem, right? So when I say core, an ERP for us is a core, the basic transaction engine that does the business. But beyond that, whether it's customer experience, employee experience, supplier experience, partner experience, or an IoT platform, all of this has to be really a ecosystem which connects to the core. So what are the three, four things they have to really take care? One, the core system should be absolutely secure. And so you have to guard your core, including your core data, securely, while it integrates with other systems through an intermediate middleware. That is one. So you must have a very strong middleware-based architecture. Number two, you have to be very careful in the way data flows across the organizational ecosystem. So in the way you are managing the data flow, whether it be staging the data and making sure the integration is very secure and taking care. And all the data that is coming into the system across the multiple ways into the organization has to be absolutely security checked. So you have to have a security check around all the data, because data is going to flow all over the place now in an ecosystem. It's not just confined to a few databases that is there in your data center anymore. It's just going to be an ecosystem. And finally, the last point, which are really coming up consistently for us. One, I think we have to build an architecture that is going to allow you to seamlessly make the information flow across boundaries of the enterprise. You cannot confine now information flow just to a few of your partners or just within the enterprise. You have to build an architecture where the information exchange can flow across the multiple, whether it starts from supplier to your supply chain partners, to you, to your customers, and customers' customers. And while you do that, how do you secure your data, your ecosystem data? Number one. So the main thing is, how do you provide an open connectivity? Today, if you look at, I think we are talking about working from home. How do you provide connectivity to people using the open internet? You don't anymore of secure internet is now we have to question that. There's nothing called a secure internet. Can you get your people to work on an open internet? So one is open connectivity. That should be number one for the integration of, for the purpose of integration. Second, I think the architecture should allow your employees also to be able to innovate and bring in new things faster. Because earlier architectures are very rigid, right? It would not allow you to anything from outside to be brought in, experimented very, very soon. In the agile world, I had to be able to get something from outside, from a third party, to quickly integrate with my ecosystem and get the business benefit faster. So you have to really have an architecture that allows your people to bring in new technology, experiment with it, scale it up, and take a decision faster. So these are broadly what I would say you should be considering as an architecture. And I must tell you that it's rapidly changing. Your old architectures are all no more valid. You must really transform it fast and very quick.
Thank you, Mr. Jagdish. You spoke about ecosystem play. You spoke about the need for integration. You spoke about keeping the core system intact, but building a layer on top of it. And I just can't resist. But Mr. Neeraj, this is a question for you. How and we know that in banking we have a core system, right? Core banking system, which is like very sacrosanct. And then banks are also now delving with ecosystem play with other fintech players, other startups, and they're also delving with open API banking. So, in your view, how is architecture evolving? Keeping all these parameters that Mr. Jagdish has been talking about. What's your view on the agility and the speed of business that is happening through this architectural change?
Well, I would, I think Jagdish has covered most of it, but I think the main key thing is, the going forward, the architecture has to be more emergent, a more dynamic architecture. Gone are the days where you have like 3 years down the line, some architecture in mind and you just go off that. It is more about you take step by step, you bring in things, you test and learn, and you see what is the value of building, taking the step forward to the organization and to your customer. So I think that is important. And on the other point, gone are also the days of, because of speed and agility, large monolithic applications, because it's too risky. The architecture has to be safe, simple, smart. So what you need is a more microservices, API-based architecture. And the way I think, what APIs does it's just almost like, you can see them as Lego toys. You can bring those different together and build up new services. So that gives you that speed and agility where, you can bring in different services together and be able to give a new proposition to your customer very fast. But also from an organization point of view, you stop duplication of efforts. There's a strong focus on reusability across the enterprise architecture. And these microservices and APIs build, bring in that reusability and everything. So I think let's go forward. In fact, most of the banks, like we call ourselves Bank of APIs now going forward. That's the way we look at ourselves. And to just add that, I think there's another part of it in the architecture. There's a very strong, apart from cloud, hybrid clouds and everything, every organization has to start thinking more seriously about build versus buy. What does it make sense within that architecture to build versus buy? And where to use open source architecture, because open source architecture does give you speed and agility to integrate, different things which are built by different fintechs. So it gives you that speed and agility. So I think these are some of the other things from an architecture point of view that we all need to think about.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Neeraj. Mr. Saurav, I'm coming back to you. And while we are talking about architecture, obviously, in the digital channel has become a priority for insurance companies, and insurance selling had traditionally been hard, and now people can't meet others. So digital channel, obviously, zero touch insurance, as they call it, is becoming the need of the hour. So how in your mind this channel architecture, web, mobility, and other channels, along with the corresponding services, Mr. Neeraj touched about microservices and integration, how in your mind it is evolving in the insurance space?
The insurance is no different than probably banking in that standpoint. The way we look at is what is core is a very important decision right upfront to be taken. Now it's easier said than done, right? Is your core policy admin the real core, or is it something beyond it, right? Let's say for an insurance company, right? If risk assessment and underwriting is my key, what stays within my core and what stays outside it? Is it around pricing? Is it around claims? Is it around, you really have to define that core. And that's where the digital channels also mean, because end of the day, the consumers are different for each channel through which the insurance is getting sold. Insurance today in India and worldwide continues to be an intermediated, largely an intermediated channel. What digital channels are doing, and I run the digital channel, and what we do is, we look at specific consumer profiles. It may or may not be completely end-to-end digital even now. It may be an omni-channel experience, an online to offline or an offline to online kind of an experience. You still have very less percentage, right, of commerce in spite of what we hear. So architecture also has to be like that. Architecture has to be, I would say, loosely coupled and flexible by design, what has been, talked about. Thinking has to evolve in terms of business components, not technology components, which talk to each other, in various ways, not just in silos. Architecture, as we said, is ecosystem play. This is becoming extremely important even for insurance or banking or any of those, because essentially in that it is not just from an architecture standpoint, but there has to be a concept of shared value, right? And it's not just in terms of business sense. I'm saying even in terms of technology and process sense, right? What is it in what's in it for each ecosystem player has to be very clear, very and very clear right from the beginning. And finally, things like reusability, extensibility has to be is even critical than before. Look, end of the day, it's about experience. Whether we use a sachet product, whether we use a full comprehensive product in insurance, what we are seeing is the consumer type is different. Some people are very, very effective and efficient and want no intervention, no manual intervention. They're very comfortable, doing the entire journey using a bot, using a whatever, through a website, through an app, various ways, right? Whatever channel. There are some who want some nudges, and these nudges could include co-browsing. Very simple things, right? Co-browsing. Help me at the right point, right? And don't help me through the entire process. Or there are people who would be comfortable doing the entire process with someone as an assisted model, not in a DIY, but right at the payment stage, they would want to do it independently. So I would say technology to support the different consumer behaviors, different consumer segments, has to not just evolve, but be very flexible. And I think, Neeraj mentioned those Lego blocks, right? I think we have taken that to actual heart, right? In terms of business components and reusable business components, if we can do that effectively, and any business or enterprise can do that, not just from a conceptual PPT, where I would say actually on the ground, real deployable components. I think that's the key, and that's what we are seeing in insurance, very, very happening at a very fast pace now.
Thank you, sir. Lego blocks. Love that term. We used to call them loosely coupled architecture at one point in time, but now it is more about Lego blocks, right? And also, commerce, from a commerce perspective, we are seeing conversational commerce being vogue now. You basically chat, basically talk through bots, and then you finally get guided toward buying something. Very interesting times indeed.
And Sonak, I'll add one more thing.
Sure.
See, from an insurance standpoint, when you look at business, insurance versus push versus pull, right? That's a worldwide phenomenon in insurance, right?
Correct.
How do you create that pull? The small ticket insurance, right? Corona was one example, right? Few hundred rupees you can buy a cover, or things like what we launched with various e-commerce platforms, right? The mobile screen damage insurance. Those are typically the pull products, but largely it continues to be push. The only way to get that push to pull is using conversational sale and service model. A conversational sale, if digital can crack that model of getting people through a conversational sale, I think we will change the paradigm that we are talking in financial services, not just insurance.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Saurav. We will shift to a slightly different topic now. Mr. Arijit, I'll come back to you now. And we would love you to demystify something for us. We keep on hearing about hyper-connected digital ecosystems as an ecosystem enabler. Can you throw some light into this? What does it mean? What's the utility?
Sure. I think all the panelists, Jagdish, Neeraj, and sort of kind of touched it and demystified with kind of use cases, but let me kind of add to that. I think over the last few years in their journey of digital adoption, what has happened is organizations have landed themselves into a disjointed enterprise IT environment across different business functions, right? And this is mainly due to a few reasons. First, the different factors that were considered for their cloud and network deployment. Second, how they embedded security within these initiatives. And third, I think, was the lack of a kind of a unified workforce collaboration strategy. Now, hyper-connected ecosystem is all about connecting employees, customers, partners, the devices, and rest of your business ecosystem through any channel, anytime, and anywhere, right? It is about offering consistent experiences across the enterprise value chain to both internal and external stakeholders. And like we keep saying again and again, most important is build trust. Because first time the customer will transact with you on expectation, the second time he will transact with you only if you have been able to deliver the trust with him, especially in the digital world. And all this will be an outcome of how integrated our digital architecture is, including the multi-cloud estate, the data platforms, the network estate, and the layer of security that cuts across the enterprise architecture. While even a few years back, the primary place for doing business was a defined physical location, right? Be it an office or a bank or a retail store, that we all know is changing dramatically. The network and the compute today no longer decides where the user or customer will access it from. The network and the compute today must self-adjust basis where the user and the customer will want to access it from, right? Similarly, it is for security controls. Now, we have been working very closely within Tata Communication with a lot of our customers to kind of deliver this integrated digital stack across their cloud network and collaboration landscape underpinned by the right security architecture. Now, let me kind of briefly touch upon a few of them in terms of how these integrated conversations are really happening. Let's start with the network transformation. I think discussions here have kind of matured from to bring in the aspects of convergence of both network and security through SASE models. Focuses on enterprises being able to manage direct to internet traffic, create deterministic paths on the internet, which kind of revolutionizes the way you can manage your traffic on the internet while enjoying its flexibility and cost benefit. Discussions have obviously moved away from X.25 to internet lease lines to MPLS and now to software-defined networks. Similarly, on the security side, as we all know, the historical posture of most of the organizations was based on having a hardened perimeter around the data center. But with applications and data increasingly moving beyond the traditional corporate perimeter into the public cloud or the edge, it is now more about securing everything everywhere. It is about securing data at rest to kind of securing data in motion. It is also about the movement that is happening from an user and role-based authentication to zero trust network access. On the unified collaboration front, the architecture discussions for global enterprises, what we are seeing is moving from having pockets of excellence and islands on multiple OEMs to a single collaboration platform. And that could be powered by the right AI and the RPA that kind of gives a homogeneous and an omnichannel experience to all the customers and employees. Similarly, if you see the cloud transformations, they are not just limited to today cloud venue decisions, whether public, private or hybrid, or the migration plans, but everything is integrated. The data and AI strategy is looked at, the network planning needs to be looked at, the application affinity and interdependency mapping needs to be looked at, and from day zero, the compliance needs to be there along with, of course, the right security controls. And now with 5G on the anvil, which I think is going to kind of, again, disrupt a lot of business models, with compute and data analytics moving from the cloud to the edge, IoT kind of taking center stage, I think the integrated technology stack for the new digital architecture is going to be more connected than ever. And this hyper-connected digital ecosystem, I think, is going to throw up countless business opportunities and growth and really kind of drive the organizations to be innovating and kind of disrupting their own business models.
Thank you, Mr. Arijit. So basically what we are looking at here is a completely interconnected enterprise between people, business, channels, devices, technologies, everybody, it is all connected. If I just take one area of this hyper connection, you mentioned about IoT, right? And Mr. Jagdish, if I may come to you, we know about the industry 4.0 wave that has hit us. We know that IoT technologies are now coming onto the fore. And keeping in mind this hyper-connected digital ecosystem that Mr. Arijit spoke about with 5G coming up, we know AR/VR is coming up quite fast. So this traditional IT, the way the architecture we were discussing, versus this operational technology components, IoT devices which are coming up. What kind of challenges are being faced by industries in order to fuse them, in order to integrate them? And what would be your advice as to how these potential challenges can be navigated?
Okay, I think Arijit kind of addressed most of the thing, but let me pick up specifically now. What Arijit said is good intent, and when we get into getting it done, I'll tell you the challenges that we as industry professionals have to look at. One is that there is today an eagerness for the OT folks to just say, take everything of my data to the cloud and do insight. So it is in the eagerness to just use the cloud and the computing power that is there and the vendors coming and selling IoT, there is a whole lot of need to take every data from OT to the IT side. So I would say, first hold on, pull back yourself and ask the following questions. One, when we talk about OT IT convergence, extremely critical for you is to ensure that your OT side doesn't get compromised, because If your the OT side is compromised, your operations will come to a standstill, right? So number one is data security. And how do you do it? I'll come to a few, 2-3 challenges. Second is, what do you really want to take to the cloud from OT? While the real-time data availability is a very, very important aspect of the IoT, but how much of the data are you really going to consume real time to make decisions? How much of data you want to just take it for analytics later? That is something that you need to really be very clear. It's not that, take everything from OT and take it to the cloud. It's not the way we look at it. You have to look at what is really the data that needs to be taken out of OT. How much can you do the edge computing? Everything need not go to the cloud. So you also manage the velocity of data, the speed of data, and what is the network becomes a very important aspect. So do you have the sufficient bandwidth, whether it is going to go through your public network or private network, whatever it is. I think the bandwidth becomes an extremely important factor for you to right upfront gauge, and then take only that data which you really want to use for insights to the cloud with a defined business problem. Do not jump into taking all the data to the cloud and say, I will see what to do later, and let me first take to the cloud. You must do the other way. Just ask yourself, what is the business problem you're going to try to solve by taking the OT data onto an analytics platform. Once you formulate your business problems, decide then do you need an edge analytics right at the on-premise, or do you need to take it to the cloud? So you should start with a business problem and then look at what data I need to take, decide where you want to take it, where you want to process it, where do you want to give insights, how many layers of insights you want to give. The first layer of insights is alarms. Second layer of insights is anomaly detection. Third layer of insight is analytics. So all of this need not be done in the cloud. So you can do a lot of this on-premise. Okay. The biggest factor for you is how are you going to guard your OT equipments, OT endpoints from security? Because like an IT environment, it is not that you can easily patch up or you can get an EDR or an AV so easily like you do on the IT. So there are two important things that we must all look at from a network segmentation. Is an OT network segmented well? Like we do a lot of good things in the IT side, but exact same principles you have to apply on the OT side in terms of segmentation, micro segmentation of your OT network, network management of your OT devices, a separate isolated network for managing the OT devices. What is the right antivirus? What is the right EDR? All of this has to be a complete strategy like you do for IT side. You will have to have a team doing it exactly the way it is being done for IT and done by the operations people. This is not something that traditionally IT has handled. IT has never handled the OT. IT has always handled the IT side where it is a network world, whereas OT is typically traditionally not a network world. You are now going to create a network with micro-segmentation, everything new. So first handle that network part. Second, decide what data you want to really take out for analytics. Third, decide whether you want to analyze at the local or at the edge or at the cloud. Fourth, only take those data for which you really need to take an insight. Don't blindly take all the data back to the cloud. And the problems that you typically solve in the manufacturing is, how do I improve my uptime? How do I improve my quality? How do I reduce my cost? So ask yourself very tough questions. If I have to solve these problems, what is the data I need to take and focus on that? So security, network architecture on the OT side, replication of all the IT side practices in the OT operations. Third and fourth is edge architecture, very important. And who is the cloud platform? What do you want to take to the cloud? And fifth and last one is the bandwidth. These are what I would say are very, very important and critical.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jagdish. So be selective is the primary advice that you provided, right? Whether it is on the data side, whether it is on the throwing the devices side, whether it is employing edge computing and edge analytics front. Mr. Neeraj, if I may switch to you, this entire discussion that we are having on this hyper-connected world, usage of operation technology, network, 5G convergence, how do you think banks are going to evolve, keeping all this in mind? What kind of opportunities banks sense and what kind of impact it's going to have on a banking architecture?
So I would say, the way I see is from a technology perspective, the world has changed, from a legacy where technology used to be seen, investment technology as a cost center or a investment to reduce costs. I think what has happened is, technology has become more like a software asset that are seen by business as a product that they can actually, market itself. And I think there are very good examples like we have seen from Google's and Amazon's, where they've created a multi-billion-dollar business out of, their technology architecture, right? So that's there. And I think similar thing is happening on the banking technology side also, where, we are looking at opportunities to monetize, a lot of these things that we're building, especially when I talked about API, we know data very well about our customers. So there is an excellent opportunity for us, as long as, within the maintaining the privacy and respect to the regulators, you can use that data to monetize. I mean, there's a whole concept of embedded banking, which is coming, which is companies which are not into banking, they want to embed banking services. And that's where these technologies that we're building can be very useful, can be sold as a product to them. And from an architecture point of view, looking into that space, I think payments is one space that is moving ahead very fast, right? There's a lot of things happening. On to that, from an architecture point of view, we have covered a lot of things. So, but I would say, two things which is specifically there is, it also needs to, we are looking at very strong, performant enterprise application interface pattern. What happens is, and as you decouple applications, you have a lot of these. The reality is they are talking a lot to each other. And sometimes, like simply taking a payment case, the whole conversation can become very chatty because you're just talking across too much. And, with latency in mind, speed in mind, you need to have a very performant enterprise application interface out there, so that first, you're not doing a lot of transformation of data. So standard interfaces, you don't end up doing standard transformation data. Plus, the transmission has to be very secure, because the reality is you are in a hybrid cloud, certain things are in-house and everything, so how do you do that? And that's where, a lot of asynchronous communication is important in that. How do you get into an asynchronous kind of an architecture, a more event-driven architecture, right? So that is something which is really, I think, is very important, going forward from a low latency point of view. And the other part of the architecture is, how do you build applications which are self-monitored and self-healing? Because in that kind of architecture, if something goes down and then you start reacting, it's too late. What you need is a very well monitored, something that is monitored very well and something self-healing. So I think these are the other two aspects from an architecture point of view that, we are very much looking into.
Thanks, Mr. Neeraj. You mentioned about payment, you mentioned about the pressure that this architecture is facing. And we spoke about a lot of data coming from all devices, from the fields, from the ecosystem. So performance is going to be very key for any enterprise now, and the architecture has to gear up for performance. So Mr. Saurav, if I may ask you, how enterprises are gearing up to handle this kind of load in terms of data, in terms of concurrency, in terms of users, integration, and what can be done in this particular space?
From again an enterprise standpoint, you have to be clear that there are various parts of the enterprise. As I mentioned, there is the whole B2B2C model, a B2C model, an intermediated model. So right for each one of them, the architecture may be different. Your underlying core may be the same. Your microservices architecture more or less, may be the same. But then depending on who the consumer is, what kind of products and services you're offering, I think each one of these are different. Let me tell you an example. See, in many cases, from an insurance standpoint, on a claims lifecycle, when you look at the claims lifecycle, there are two parts. One is many people are interested in knowing very specifically on submitting the claim and knowing about the status of the claim. It's as simple as that, right? There are very few people who would want something to be available on a real-time basis and be able to see what is the update on that. Have you approved my claim or not? Now, architectures for these two, performance is different, the expectation is different, and therefore how you set up that entire thing is completely different. For someone, as Neeraj mentioned, it's an asynchronous architecture. It's just a status update, right? Because many people are more interested in giving that as a feedback. Whereas we have created things wherein if you get into an accident, you can actually take pictures of your vehicle, and then in the back end, you're essentially doing image recognition. You're using deep learning algorithms and actually doing image recognition and giving back the result in real time. Therefore, your architecture has to scale and has to be relevant for the use cases and for the kind of consumers and the kind of businesses that you are trying to serve. The key here is one size fit all doesn't work anymore. The segments are different, and therefore techies or technology architectures, right, and the design of those has to keep up with that, and to be able to to assemble it and then deliver it over a period of time. The second is, look, performance, security, in all us techies used to talk about, right, and now I'm talking about late 90s, early 2000, right? Non-functional requirements, NFRs is the term that we used to use. I still remember, right? These used to be afterthoughts, right? Afterthoughts in the sense that first you're designing something and delivering something as for functional aspects, right? Then you think about these two. Guess what? Today's day and age, performance and security has to be embedded by design in the architecture right up front. You need to think about it, as you are designing, because it cannot be an afterthought. Doing a patchwork, a band-aid, just, you will do a patchwork forever, right? Going on. So I think from a performance standpoint, it also depends that as you should plan for it right up front. The third, the aspect of this is over a period of time, the performance has also gone into the kind of architectures that we are developing based on the not just the needs of the business, but needs of the partners. As I said, it's a lot of this is ecosystem play now, right? As we mentioned. Therefore, it becomes very important that what are you trying to do, who are you trying to integrate with, and then what are the needs of that. So effectively, these are the three considerations, I would say, from a performance standpoint that you need to see in your architecture, and most important, design for it right up front, not as an afterthought.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Saurav. I think we are over the time, quite over the time, in fact. The conversation has been very engaging. I thank you all the panelists, Mr. Jagdish, Mr. Neeraj, Mr. Rijit, and Mr. Saurav, for this wonderfully engaging conversation. I think we have a lot of takeaways. With that, I would hand it over to Shikha for conclusion, and we will end here our wonderful session. Shikha, over to you.
Thank you, Sonak. I'm all set to take charge. But, before marching ahead, I have to say a big thank you to you for so superbly weaving the conversations there, and to the entire panel that really talked about how emerging technologies can really and actionably be used for our maximum benefit, from cloud to IoT to trust and governance, identity and access management, master data management. You touch threads around it. So thank you very, very much. And Arijit, there was this particular thing that I really loved when you said how a customer first comes as an expectation, with an expectation, but later that expectation converts into trust. So we got to take care of that. So on that note, a big thank you to all of you for taking the time out and joining us on this day of TechCon. Thank you very, very much. And ladies and gentlemen watching us very diligently, yes, I know since morning, it's time now finally for the closing keynote, because this would be our next step towards sustainable data ecosystems. So you got to be there with us. Be there with us, hold with us for some more bit. Right now it's time, take a quick, I won't say a break, because you got to be very mindful. Let's quickly visit the Cloudera booth at the Experience Zone and fill up the feedback forms very quickly out there, because I will be back with an very eminent speaker talking to us. I'll be right back.